Hello everyone, Adam Steele here, and today there are two new plugins coming out from Waves. They are the Lil Tubes and the Magma BB Tubes. So let's check them out today. That's right, it's Black Friday and these have just been released, and so it's going to be absolutely fascinating to check them out. There is an affiliate link in the description below. I'm not being paid by Waves to make this video, but if you like these and you buy them through my link, then I do get a bit of a kickback. So yes, it's kind of a sponsored video, but kind of not. Also, there is a video on Produce Like a Pro going out where you'll see a little featurette of me covering this kind of thing as well. So without further ado, let's move over to this window, which is of course Reaper in full 4K glory. This is a track that I just did for some super nerdy videos that might be out now, they might be coming out soon, where I'm comparing a load of different SM57s, which is the most nerdy thing. But I've tried the Lil Tube stereo on the buses of the drum bus, the bass bus, and the guitar bus, for which I've just stuck with a stock SM57 boring straight ahead on the guitar amps. The rhythms are 5150s, and the clean is actually a low gain input on an old Marshall JMP from the late 70s. And it's not the usual kind of thing you'd hear from me, which is usually kind of rock and metal. I thought I'd do something a little different, and it sounds like this. Now, if I turn off the little tubes on everything, it still sounds good, but it doesn't sound quite as thick. And when I turn them back on, it sounds thicker, fuller, and also it does sound louder, but I checked the meters and it's not louder. And that's important because I played around with the output volume on each one of these as I pushed the drive, because I didn't want things to become louder on the meters. They just sound like they're louder because they're pushing up against that valve saturation kind of thing. The Lil Tube is the one that's free for Black Friday. And so, yeah, if you want to go and grab that, this is free. And then we'll look at the BB tubes, which is more of an advanced, complex thing. It's exactly this kind of idea, but you can tweak it a bit more depending on what you need out of your setup. So, the Lil Tube stereo is a thing. And so let's check out the drums first, which are the ELE drums that are running through Contact. It's moaning about sample rate changes. That is fine. And so, drum kit, there we go, ELE. And without the Lil Tubes, it's a very clean drum kit, which is great for like modern rock and modern metal. But to make this fit a bit more, I turned on Lil Tube and started with the drive on 0 and pushed it until it sounded good. And that's too much, so back down we go. And I think I ended up with it where this light is just twitching on the transients. And of course the output volume, then when I got the three elements together, I pulled them down so that when I turned them on and off, the level was the same. Now, the sensitivity switch is interesting because on soft mode, it does just sound louder, although if I pull the volume back, it is not just louder, it is rounder and thicker sounding. But the normal sensitivity does have that crunch to it. And the high sensitivity is really distorted at the top end. So if you pull that back with the high sensitivity, you can get it to be more crunched at lower kind of levels. But then what I like to do there was get the sensitivity and push the drive up and find that balance where there's a little bit more of that crunch thing going on the hits. because without it, sounds good. With it, it's making my headphones hit me a bit harder with that kick drum, and that's kind of what I wanted. And with the bass, this was the real thing for me. Let's just... This is without. And then with, that's too much. But if I just pull it back to the point where it's almost clipping, but not, and then turn it off. This is already Amplitude's version of the Ampeg kind of flip top. I think it's a B15 kind of amp through a 15-inch speaker, so it's already fairly driven because it's quite a low output amp, so very Motown. It's actually more distorted than you think it is. But then on top of that, the little tubes just gives it that extra thickness. If I play the drums and bass together, because it didn't sound like there was much going on the bass, but if I turn it off, you'll feel that the low end just kind of gets thinner. And there it is. And very similar with the guitars. That seems to be kind of bringing the low end up in terms of its overall level because of the harmonic distortion down there, but also any of the clean bits here. Without, it's very spiky. And with, those spikes are kind of tamed a little bit so that clean guitar sits in the mix just that little bit more. Probably why a lot of these classic albums from the late 60s, early 70s sound so good is that valve kind of saturation, when moderated properly, can do some really nice things to the tone. Now, let's move on to looking at a different track and the BB tubes, which is significantly more in-depth. Alright, this is a more rocky kind of alt-rock, I guess indie kind of sounding track. This is Indoctrinating Sound by Hobo Hotel. And what I've done with this one is exactly the same. I've strapped the tubes across the different buses. This time also including vocals and effects groups. So even the effects group has that. But this is not the Lil Tube, this is the BB tubes, which has a lot more controls going on. So this is the drums. So I'm just going to solo the drums. Very crunchy. And without, much cleaner. So with the output down, let's start from the start. We'll leave everything at 0 and build this back up to show you kind of what I did. There is a dry-wet mix on these, which is really cool, but I kept that all the way on wet because that's kind of how I would use valve gear. I would generally, unless I was going for some absolute destruction, probably run everything through it, just less so, rather than bringing the dry wet back and then crushing it to death. That's something that I do, but not in this kind of way. So let's start with the Beauty, which is quite a nice saturation. At least it is until you get to the point where it's making the kick drum go boff, boff, boff. But let's stay there and play with the sensitivity. I think the sensitivity might be like an overall control, so if you find that you've got the settings almost perfect with everything else but it's a little too much or a little not enough, the sensitivity might be a really good way to just get that little extra or just back it off just a little bit without changing the balance, because the Beauty is really nice but the Beast is kind of where it's at in terms of really grabbing attention. yeah, you can hear when I push the beast, it really goes into just full-on vrong, 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 vrong territory. Let's change it to type B because that was quite a lot more aggressive, I found. And seems to focus on the mids a lot more, so I'm going to blend the Beauty and Beast here. And the bass relief knob is really useful because now we can hear the low ends going bong, 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 bong. We can change it so that the low end doesn't pass through as much. And that's just about where I had it before on the Type A Beast because I want like the floor tom to have some crunch to it, but I don't want to completely destroy the kick drum and everything else going through. And the last thing to play with for me, the transformer on and off is nice. I'll try that. The transformer setting seems to kind of hold everything back in the mid-range a little bit and soften it off, which is part of why I like transformers and use them a lot. But then the tone pre and post is where it really gets clever, because what I can do is push the pre, which means at the high end, going into the distortion gets distorted more. And then if that's too bright, with the post I can then turn everything back down afterwards. So that's what I did with the drums. And so this absolutely mad sounding thing now, here's how it was before. Nice and vanilla, and then as an extra little bonus in the corner, there's an upsample option, which can go from off, which is very low CPU usage, to times 8. And the higher up, generally, you go with upsampling, especially with things that generate distortion. The kind of cleaner and more accurate the distortion is, which for me is always a good thing, although it comes at the cost of more CPU usage. By default, it's on times 4, which at 48 kilohertz, I'm happy to stick with. Sometimes the low end can get a little bit less defined on like the pure low end, like the sub stuff. So this might not be appropriate to use on the low end of tracks on like R&B, hip hop kind of stuff, maybe. But if you're finding that your low end isn't coming out of the speakers on small setups, then something like this might just help you out, because that upsampling then isn't a problem, because it's going to shift the super low end with the distortion up into something that you can feel. So yeah, that now sounds like a good, thick, angry rock drum kit.
We lock towards emotion, caught by the evil eye. Do as you're told, get in line, be a man.
So that's our vocal that was already quite driven.
Reluctant towards emotion, caught by the evil eye.
That's how it was before. We've got a little bit of bass relief going on, a lot of the beauty and not a lot of the beast, but that's the type B. So with the type A, a bit cleaner.
Reluctant towards emotion, caught by the evil eye.
And then I'll flick from type A to type B on this line.
Reluctant towards emotion, caught by the evil eye.
It definitely seems to have a kind of a which is helping for me the vocal stand out. So I've dulled it a little bit pre-distortion because I didn't want it crackling the top end, especially on things like S's. And then I've brightened it up a little afterwards in post, and that has kind of given me a nice thing that helps the vocal to sound more authoritative.
Reluctant towards emotion, caught by the evil eye. Do as you're told, get in line, be a man. Clash against the wall, burn and die, you fat old bag.
here's the chorus, which is more sung. And without. So with that valve drive, that's just giving it more authority, even on the kind of the more gentle sung stuff. And then, of course, I'm passing that through to a slapback delay, which now has its own saturation on top, which really kind of solidifies that place in the mix. And the bass, again, like we did on the previous track, this is quite driven. And so you can see I've used the bass relief here, so it's not just a mush on the low end, but the beauty is really cranked all the way up. And without, it sounds like this. Which sounds good. And this sounds bigger, sounds fuller. And this is with, like I said, the output volume turned down. Decent. So there you go. That is the BB Tubes, which is on offer right now. You can grab it on the Waves link down in the description below. The Lil Tubes is currently free, I think, and the BB Tubes is not very expensive. So if you want it, go grab it. And like I said at the start of the video, we get a bit of a kickback. Thank you everybody for watching. Thanks all the patrons on Patreon for helping us out to make videos like this possible. And we'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.